live a little differently, or perhaps at least look at your world a little differently. I want to talk to you about what it means to live an authentic, conscious life. So, hello, everybody, and I'm so grateful to have you here. Welcome to the podcast or to the YouTube channel episode today, depending on how you're listening or whether you're listening or watching. I have the great honor of having my friend and colleague with me today, Dr. John Bucher, and he is just. I had the great fortune of meeting him during the pandemic, which is interesting because not a whole lot was going on during the pandemic, which I think both of us being super busy people, that's actually what allowed us to connect because there wasn't a whole, there was a lot of stuff going on, of course, but what a gift it has been to meet you and get to know you. And I'm just so excited that John's with me today. And I know that all of you are just going to love him too. So welcome, John. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, industry. I'm reflecting, on that time during the pandemic that I too um, had all this space, this open space in my life that I didn't normally have. And while it was a difficult time, I'm just now starting to see some of the gifts that that time brought. And
Mhm.
one of those gifts definitely was you being brought into my world and my space. And um, I'm so thankful that the universe opened in such a way that
Mhm.
I could um, develop new friendships and meet new people that I might not have met otherwise. So, um, isn't there such truth in that, that almost with everything we lose, we gain something as well? With
Absolutely.
everything where there's
Abs-
pain, there's also a gift.
Well, I think, and I love that you said that. And I think it's going to connect to what I would love to talk to you about today. Um, I believe there's a gift in everything,
Mm,
and the difference, and I believe that there's a gift in everything for everyone. It's not that, I'm like more special than anybody else or you're more special than anybody else, but I think that we share a perspective.
yeah.
I tell my clients all the time, life is not about what happens. It's about how you hold it. It's about what you see and what you allow to inform your lens through which you see yourself and others in life. But I truly believe that. Yeah, I think that that's so true. And you were one of those gifts for sure. And I guess let's start there. I mean, what I'm doing, I did a series on conscious living, which
Yeah.
some of you may have listened to or seen interviews from that series. What I'm doing with this series is I really want to look at what is the act, how do we create change? What is the action in terms of creating change in our lives and indeed creating lives that we want to live?
Mm,
And I know for me, I've always been a voracious reader and I've always been a huge fan of movies and, theater and art and all the rest of it. And I think because the reason I have been such a fan is because story has been so healing for me. I can think of, I've read certain books over and over and over again, and I know exactly what's going to happen, just like I've seen certain movies millions of times and exactly when I'm going to cry or when I'm going to laugh. But
yeah.
story to me is such a powerful tool. And indeed, I think it seems to me anyway um, that storytelling and narrative is inherent to who we are. Would you agree with that, or what do you
I
think?
sure would. Yeah. I really believe it's one of those things that makes us human. And
Absolutely.
the fact that our brains are constantly trying to make meaning out of every situation that we encounter, out of every person that we encounter. We're constantly trying to solve this problem of what does this mean and how do I fit into this situation? And it's so
Mhm.
interesting that you bring up this idea of change in conjunction with stories and storytelling, because change is one of those essential things when I do storytelling consulting and we look at a character in a film or a television show or a novel.
And
One
John,
of the
tell us a
key,
little bit about what you do
yeah.
in our world, because I'm sorry I didn't include that as when I
Oh,
introduced you.
we jumped right in as we do, right?
As we do.
Yeah, I do a lot of different things that are all based around story and storytelling,
Mhm.
and I really found that my life became so much easier a few years ago when I stopped trying to narrow myself down to a single job description,
Mhm.
and I started to embrace my work as an ecosystem.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that that is really helpful to a lot of people who have a lot of different interests and things that they do in their life. And, for me, in order to have a healthy ecosystem of the work that I do, it was essential that I find what was at the center of that ecosystem. So, in
Hmm.
the world of myth and psychology, we often refer to this as the axis mundi,
Right.
this place that life sprang out of. And, Carl Jung talked quite a bit about the axis mundi being sort of this place that has such connection to our collective unconscious and is a universe. And so, for me, the center of that ecosystem, the axis mundi, is story. It's storytelling. So everything I do revolves around that. So I do consulting for film and television and
Hmm.
novels and comic books and all sorts of things like that. But I also work with individuals and organizations and even sometimes governments on how we take the principles of story and storytelling and we
Hmm.
bring those principles into our lives to try and live a better story.
Mm. I
What's
love that.
what's interesting about that to me is
Mhm.
we live in this really complicated world right now where there's not a lot of agreement on what's a good story or a bad story. Because
Right.
what might be a good story for one person may be a bad story for someone else. And what
Mhm.
may uh, cause, one group of people to thrive, it may oppress another group of people.
Mhm.
And so it gets really complex in trying to parse apart what is a good story and a bad story. But I do believe that we're all capable of a better story.
Mhm.
And if we just maybe use that as a springboard or a starting place to say, well, it's not, perfect. I'm not perfect, but um, I would say if I could embrace a better story
Mhm.
than the one that I have in my own life, or that we as a group of people have, if we could say, you know what, there's something better out there. Let's go
Mhm.
search for it. Let's go after that.
Mhm.
That is it's more manageable to me. It's
Mhm.
more exciting to me. It's more inspiring to me. So wherever I find myself in this ecosystem of work, I am trying to initiate a better story in my own life, in the
Mhm.
lives of the people that I'm around, and the culture I live in, and the world I live in. I'm trying to help initiate a better story. So that sort of encapsulates that.
I think that's so beautifully said. And as you're talking, what I'm thinking of, and this is what's so interesting to me, is um, if we have a series of events, let's say, that happens during the period of a day, um, depending on our lens, right? Two people can go through the same day, right? Spilling your coffee, traffic, this, that, all of these things, right? And have a completely different story or narrative that they tell about the day.
Yes.
What's and I do I say I when I work with clients, I do this a lot, which is, you know, what are you invested in?
Mm,
I feel like stories, I mean, I know for myself, I'm such a huge movie fan and such a huge fan of television and characters,
yeah,
right? And there's certain reasons why I will double down on certain movies, certain books, certain characters because I'm invested.
right.
There's something, some part of me needed to meet that character. Some part of me needed to express this line of narrative or have hear this line of narrative or read it or see it.
Yeah,
So in kind of going back to what you're saying about creating better stories,
yeah.
I wonder what you think about this idea of to me, I kind of liken it to building a house.
Yeah.
You build a house, it's not about collecting the lumber. That's like the last thing you do, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm now not in construction, full disclosure, but I mean, I've moved enough to know, and I've been involved in house purchasing and all that. But um, we have to dig a foundation,
Yeah.
right? You don't know what kind of crap is in the dirt that you're going to have the ground that is going to be the foundation of your home,
Yeah.
right? So we have to dig out whatever is there so that we can pour the cement
Yeah.
and then build a home, right?
That's
So I
right.
wonder in this in this context of how you're talking about creating a better story, I wonder what you think about that or how you would speak to that.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think about our lives as being works of art. I
Mm,
really do.
beautiful.
And I know that metaphor, can be complicated for a lot of people, and it may, have all sorts of tentacles that, are not helpful. But for me, it's really helpful to think about my life as a work of art.
Mm,
And if you look at the process of creating a piece of art, if you've ever watched the process of someone creating a painting or a sculpture or writing a song, it's a messy process.
mhm,
They it doesn't, it doesn't look good for a long time, and we can't even really tell what it is that's, coming into shape. However, every artist works within certain confines of their art form. So you never see a painter who would say, I'm going to create a painting, but I'm not going to use any of the primary colors or any of the colors that we know to exist in the world. I'm going to invent my own color. No, they work with what's there. In the
mm,
same way, a musician never says, I'm going to write a song, but I'm not going to use any of the existing musical notes or chords that we know are there.
right.
No
Mhm,
musician does that. But that doesn't mean that every song sounds alike or that every painting looks alike.
mhm,
What we have to embrace, I believe, is if our lives are an art form, we have to embrace the idea that there are certain confines we need to work within,
mhm,
and that no other art form out there begins without a plan.
mm,
So if someone is going to build a house, first an architect sets with the builders and all the people, and they look at a blueprint. Before someone writes a book, they create an outline.
mhm,
Before someone, writes a song, they begin to create some structure and make some chords. There's a process
mhm,
that many of us we we don't embrace to its fullest because we feel like it might be restricting. But I would suggest that um, we can do better than just improvising. Could I
mhm.
tell you an ancient story that
Oh
aligns with
yeah,
this idea?
please.
Would that be okay?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, so about 150 years ago,
Mhm.
in the western hills of China, there were reports that had come out that there were a group of people in those western hills that were practicing an art form called Zen archery.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's interesting.
Mhm.
Supposedly, what they could do is they could fire their bow and arrow and hit a target that they couldn't see with their own eyes.
This is also where we get William Tell, probably.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So
Hmm.
a group of archaeologists or anthropologists traveled over to go and see, this group of Zen archers, and it was a long trip, and they travel all the way up into the mountains, and they finally find this group of Zen archers, and they stay with them the first day, and they watch the Zen archers, and the Zen archers they meditate and they chant and they do all of these different rituals, and at the end of the day, they go over to the side of the mountain and they fire their arrows down into the forest below. So far, no one can even see where they land, but everyone then goes to bed and they wake up early the next morning. And the anthropologists go with the Zen archers all the way to the bottom of the mountain through the forest. And at the bottom of the forest, on the trees, there's targets, and
Oh
the
my
arrows are in the
gosh.
dead center of the
Wow.
targets. And,
That's
and
incredible.
it's
Wow.
incredible. The anthropologists are blown away and they can't believe, this. So they said, we've got to watch more closely and see what's happening. So they stay with them another day. Same process happens where the Zen archers, they chant and they meditate and they do all of these rituals. At the end of the day, they go over to the side of the mountain, they fire their arrows down into the forest below. Everyone goes to bed, wakes up early the next morning. They travel down different targets on different trees with the arrow right
Wow.
in the dead center. Well, this goes on for weeks. And eventually the anthropologists say, I think there's some things we're just not meant to understand. And they decide to go back home. So they pack up all their gear. And early in the morning, as they're preparing to leave, they hike down through the forest as the sun is coming up. And there were the Zen archers. And they had their arrows stuck in trees, and they had buckets of paint painting targets around wherever the arrow had hit. And I would
Wow.
suggest to
Okay.
you, many of us live our life the exact same way.
Yeah.
That wherever we fire our arrow and wherever it hits, we say, "Well, that's exactly where I meant to shoot my
I meant to do
arrow.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, I meant to do
exactly.
that."
Yeah.
But I would suggest that there's a better way, that we
Oh, that's a
don't have to,
powerful.
yeah, we don't have to just shoot our arrows and wherever it hits, we just sort of live with that, that perhaps there's a better way than painting a target around wherever our arrow hits. And I think it goes
Mhm.
back to what you were just talking about a few minutes ago, and that's this intentionality that
Mhm.
we bring to our lives. If we bring intentionality to our lives and create a basis and a structure for the story we want to tell,
Mhm.
it can be powerful. And, one of the things that I tell people is stories basically happen in three parts. There's a
Mhm.
beginning, a middle, and an end. I know that's revolutionary, right? But, Aristotle was the first one to identify that. And before then, actually, Greek tragedies just had two acts. There was just a beginning and an end.
Mhm.
So it was a big deal when somebody thought, oh, we should have a middle in these stories. Um, but our lives, in many ways, too, we think of having a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mhm.
And when I think about, my own life, I think about the beginning of my life and that first season of life. And I think many of us spend the rest of our lives trying to reconcile somehow, what's happened in that
Mhm.
first part of our lives. Um, but I recommend that people simply recognize what happened in the first part of their story.
Mhm.
See, the computer agrees with me here. Um, but if we recognize what happened at the beginning of our story, it keeps us from one, perhaps over romanticizing what happened at
Mhm.
the beginning of our
Mhm.
story, or becoming a victim where we never quite get out of this
Mhm.
place we were in at the beginning of our story, but simply recognizing it,
Yes.
acknowledging it. The middle of our story, is the longest part of our story. And this part of our story, I feel like one of the best things that we can do is to re-envision the middle of our story.
Mhm. Mhm.
What could our life look like? What possibility exists for me out there? and to re-envision the middle of our story. But we all have that last season of life,
Mm-hmm.
that end of life. And I recommend that people remember the end.
Mm-hmm.
What do I mean by that? What do you want at the end of your life to look back and see and say
Mm-hmm.
about your life?
Mm-hmm.
No one at the end of their life wants to look back and say, "Oh, I wish I'd spent more time at work."
Yeah,
Nobody says that.
exactly. No. Mm-mm.
And yet we live our lives as though that's the most
Mm-hmm.
important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So remember the end. What do you want to be able to say of your life at the end? Because right now is the story you're getting to tell that you'll reflect back on one day and get to point to and say, that was how I lived my life.
Mm-hmm.
No one is going to, at the end of their life, set back and remember that time that they binge watched Game of Thrones. No one is going to want to
I
remember
like
that.
Jon Snow a lot.
Me too. Me too. But we're going to remember those times we had with
Mm-hmm.
our family and our friends and those we loved. We're going to remember those times we traveled to other places. We're going to remember that amazing meal we had with the people we cared about. We're going to remember that experience we had at that concert or
Mm-hmm.
at that museum. We're going to remember those things. So
Well,
let's live our life in a way that we're telling that
absolutely.
story.
I think that's wonderful. And what I'm thinking about as you're saying, as you're talking, I heard this and I thought this made so much sense to me. I was watching, someone who was talking about spirituality and kind of getting, dealing with fear and all of this kind of thing. And he said, the misnomer is that we move through time.
Mm,
Actually, time moves through us.
mm,
And if you look at your past, it's a collection of present moments.
that's right. That's
And
right.
if you look at, if you look to the future is where we can kind of hang up our goals and
Yeah.
go, yeah, this is kind of where I'd like to go,
Yep.
express our desire as to where we'd like to go.
Yeah.
But then it's so critical that we come back to the present moment,
That's
right?
right.
But what's so interesting is working with clients, what I find all the time, and I think if we're honest, I know I go through it. I'm sure, everybody does or has or struggles with it to some degree.
Yep.
But I think that, they're, especially people who feel deeply,
Yeah.
right? When and feeling deeply and having a good memory, boy, that's a 1-2 punch.
Yes. Yes.
Because I'm that person. That's me. My husband will tell you I remember everything. but the thing about feeling deeply and remembering things, not just joyful things but painful things, is we almost, I feel like, so many people, they have a sense of an inevitability that attaches to the emotional state.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, no matter why my clients coming in to see me, whether it's, acute anxiety or depression or, whatever it might be,
Mhm.
um, I teach them an exercise. It's called the meditative moment,
Mhm.
and, being in the place of observing,
Yeah.
where, I ask them, okay, well, tell me about, how you're feeling or what your emotional issue is. I am anxious.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, let's look at the language of that and where that puts you, right?
Mm. Yeah.
If we language I am anxious, then you are your anxiety.
Mm.
That does not give you much room to be anything but anxious,
Yeah.
right? But if, like, as in, Buddhists and anybody who really, does meditation, they talk about this, that there's an observing self and a doing self,
Yeah.
and I think that the doing self really has to do with the ego.
Mm.
It's the got to pay the bills, got to take the kids to work and all,
Yep.
or to school and all of that.
Yep.
The being self is the one that is observing. So if we take that self construct back to I am anxious, right? What if we were to say I am noticing anxiety here,
Mm. I
right?
love that.
we've just created some space so that I'm not doomed because I'm not anxious. I am not anxiety, right? But anxiety is here, and probably joy is too, and probably peace is too. Probably other emotions are right there, and
Yep.
we have a choice. That's one thing that occurred to me is this idea of the inevitability of the emotional state. The other thing I wonder what you think about this. I tell clients all the time, if you want to create meaningful change in your life, it all starts with awareness, honesty, um, consistency, and commitment, right?
Yes.
Awareness of self, awareness of your environment, of others, a willingness to look within and be honest,
Yeah.
but to hold whatever you see without judgment,
Mm.
positive or negative.
Yeah.
You mentioned romanticizing. We totally romanticize. I know I do.
Yep.
Romanticize our memories, and all of
Yep.
a sudden it's that one summer day in June. There'll never be another day like that, right?
Yep.
But we filter everything we think about. We filter everything we remember into a narrative,
Yeah.
right? And that narrative serves us for some reason or another, whether we know it or not.
That's right.
So I believe most of us live life unconsciously and reactively. So we're
Yes.
not even aware of the stories we're creating and perpetuating and living in.
That's
And
right.
I wonder what you think about this idea of creating a better story.
Mm.
What would you say in terms of, the emotional state and judgment and present,
Yeah.
present
Yeah.
versus future and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, there is there's so much to say about this because there are certain aspects of being a human being that have kept us alive as a species.
We have
And
that survival wiring.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. And we often fall into that, of feeling like every situation we let our nervous system, which is, got thousands of years of training
Oh
flowing
yeah.
through it, that
Hmm.
we're in danger, and so we approach everything cautiously with a negativity that can become very toxic to ourselves. And
Hmm.
I do think that when we really look at what change looks like, I would suggest that change often comes down to a decision.
Hmm.
And the relationship between decisions and change, I don't think can be understated because there are certain situations that we find ourselves in that we cannot change. We
Yeah.
don't have agency in certain situations.
Yeah.
However, there are a number of situations that we always have agency
Hmm.
over. And I think bringing awareness around that bifurcation is really important. And it's a simple idea that every 12-step program embraces of help me know the things that I cannot change and the things I
Hmm.
can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And
Right.
this is a really ancient idea, but once we have differentiated what in our lives can be changed and what
Hmm.
cannot, I believe it's really important that we then not fall into the paralysis of fear around
Hmm.
decision making.
Right.
Because change is not going to just come and knock on your door. And if it does, it rarely is the kind of change we want.
Boy, that's true.
Right. So, when we're talking about wanting to see change in our lives, most of us are referring to some sort of change that helps us grow or that would be beneficial to us.
Hmm.
We're not talking about the sort of change that ruins lives.
No.
We're talking about something that makes us feel better or makes us feel good or brings some sort of quality of life to us that we crave and we desire. And
Mhm.
so we have to ask ourselves, what sort of agency do I have in this situation? And what keeps me from acting on that agency? Because many times
Mhm.
it's fear, many times it is the inability to to recognize the agency that we do have. But so often, I believe it's fear. I
Mm.
believe most of us are fearful that we will make a decision in life that we then have to live with, and we hate it, and we wish
Mhm.
we had just not made the decision at all.
Oh yeah.
And that's
Hmm.
paralyzing.
Hmm.
But
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
don't
Hmm.
you? I don't know if you agree, but I would suggest I would rather be in a situation where I make some mistakes that I then have to learn how to fix than be in a state of paralysis through fear where I'm always afraid I'm going to make a mistake, so I never do anything. Because I think that's a prison to live in that is really terrifying for most
It
people.
really is because, there's a I don't know if you're a fan of Rush, I am.
Mm,
But there's a song that by Rush called Free Will,
mm,
you know. And it says if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
that's right.
Right.
That's
And I
exactly
think,
right.
and the power of that, it's a powerful thing and it can be a terrifying thing
Yep.
because the idea of, oh, I'm going to wait for that perfect guy, or I'm going to wait for that perfect moment for me to start meditating or for me to start doing this or that. The moments are going. I mean, tomorrow comes and so does the next day and so does the next day. And time moves through us and we find ourselves, a little bit older, a little bit hopefully wiser, but not always. So, but I think it's absolutely wisdom, to realize, yeah, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. The mess, if we can embrace the mess, I think we have a hard time embracing the mess, and we have a hard time embracing the unknown,
Yeah.
and this fear that what if I, maybe even a fear of investing in the story of your dreams.
Yeah.
Why? Because, oh my God, what if it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
I don't know that I could survive that kind of devastation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've had clients tell me that, and it's kind of like, you know are we able to take conscious steps, even if it's just one a day, you
Yep.
know and feel into the joy of what we're doing, the joy of why we're connected
Yeah.
to our stories, that
Yep.
the things that we really dream about. Um, and I know myself, it's writing books. We and I have talked about this. That's where my paralysis shows up.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
whoa, this is me writing myself down on a page.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
people can look up that page. I don't know. So it should. I mean, I think if we're honest, I know
Yeah.
for me, I feel like we're always in process. That's something that's always true.
Yep.
So I wonder, yeah, what you think about.
Yeah, I'm reminded, you and I have both taken on the commitment of completing a doctorate program, and
Yes,
that's a long haul, and it's a
very long haul.
difficult thing to
Mhm.
accomplish. But we both had a dream to do it that we saw through. I remember once meeting someone, and I was just finishing my doctorate, and this person, I think they told me they were like 58 years old, and they said, "Oh, I've dreamed of doing a doctorate, but I think I've waited too late, and by the time I went through all the coursework and finished the doctorate, it would probably take me, 7 years to do it, and I'd be 65 years old." And I looked at him and I said, in 7 years, you're going to be 65 anyway.
Exactly. You're gonna be 65 anyway.
Why don't you turn 65 with a doctorate as opposed
Mhm.
to, not?
Exactly.
And I think that is where many of us um, can use a little bit of um, self-challenge. We often don't challenge ourselves enough.
Hmm.
It's that old saying, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right either
Yeah.
way, you know?
Right. Hmm.
And I determined a long time ago, if I'm going to miss the mark, it's
Hmm.
going to be by believing for too much.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Well,
if
that's,
I'm gonna
and that
miss,
reminds me, one of the, I mean, I work with children and I love working with children for this reason in
yeah,
large part. Children, they step into the magic and believe it's real. They
yeah,
flick their wands and believe that sparks are coming out
yeah,
and I am going to turn you into a toad. They
yeah,
really
yeah,
believe it. And they
yeah.
believe, if you ask a 4-year-old what they want to be when they grow up, they'll give you, I want to be a doctor, a singer, a race car
That's
driver. They'll
right.
they'll say it all.
Yeah,
They're born with this wonderful hope and excitement
yeah,
and joy. And it doesn't even occur to them that they have limits. It doesn't even occur to them, but oh yeah, of course I'm going to do that. That's what I want to do.
right,
You know.
right.
Wow. If we could say that as adults, boy, that would be amazing. I tell my clients all the time, it's adulthood that's hammered it out of us,
Yeah,
right?
that's
We
right.
came into this world as children, as babies, and
Yep,
children, and surely, our relationships and our environment. I mean, they all shape us and shape
sure.
our stories.
Yep,
Determine to some degree how much control we had over creating our stories and that
yeah,
kind of thing. But I think it's sometimes I think, getting to that place of, oh yeah, I'm going for it,
yeah.
and I can do it. It's about getting back to that place of believing in your magic,
I
believing
believe that.
in, your, I think that we all are just, unique imprints. Our souls, each of our souls are unique imprints in this universe.
Yeah,
And nothing that you express can be expressed by anyone else but you.
that's right.
Nothing that I express can be expressed by anyone else but me.
That's right.
What a different world it would be in, we would
That's
live
right.
in, right?
Yeah,
If everyone thought, yeah, I'm doing me as at full throttle as I can, and I'm
yeah,
gonna just
yeah,
really go for it. I'm gonna go for my dreams. I'm gonna really go for,
yeah.
creating my best story.
I believe there's a lot deeper sense of regret over what we don't do in life than what we do.
Yes.
We
Mhm.
sometimes make mistakes, right? And we can have regrets about decisions we made or things we did. But I believe there's a much more profound level of sadness around
Mhm.
those regrets we have for what we didn't do.
Yeah.
That missed opportunity to have said yes to something,
Mhm.
that missed opportunity to have asked that person out, that missed opportunity
Mhm.
to have tried to go out and work for ourselves, whatever it is. I think there's a much more profound sense of sadness around those regrets of when we didn't put ourselves out there, when we didn't step out, than the experiences we have where we did and maybe it fell apart. Because we always learn something from those experiences, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, and I think that this is where, to me, you mentioned living in fear as being the issue, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think most of the time, fear, if we're being honest, fear is the culprit,
Yep,
that squelches our enthusiasm, that starts to get us thinking small
yeah,
and doubting our capacity to live fully. Um, and I would say that the more we can move towards love and compassion, the more I think it'll soften the way that we see the younger versions of ourselves, the
Yes.
early drafts of the story, if you will. I was
Mm.
like, oh God,
Yeah.
that was horrible, And I think anybody who's written anything, I mean, I've written poetry for most of my life, and I cringe a little when I see some of my really early poetry. It's like, ooh, gotta love her too.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
ego's like, ooh, wow, did I write that? But
Yeah.
I mean, but there's tenderness and beauty and um wisdom in every iteration of who we have been along
That's
the
right.
way.
That's right.
That's how I feel.
Absolutely. And it would almost be like a fifth grader making fun of a second grader for being in second grade.
And they do.
And they do. And it makes no sense though, because obviously they have been there themselves,
Mhm.
they wouldn't be where they are if they didn't go through second grade. So there's such a cognitive dissonance around
Yeah.
when we do that to ourselves, and we shame ourselves for having once been in second grade. That's
Well, it's so
yeah,
interesting because I think that I believe we do that because there's some aspect of who we are or where we're headed
mhm,
that we feel insecure about. You know,
yeah,
I mean, that's what it seems like to me anyway. I mean,
yeah,
when we think about the unknown, when we think about, oh, I'm okay, I'm going to be walking, but can I see the signs? Where am I going? How is this
yeah,
going to happen? How is that going to happen? We can start to feel powerless if we go back to that anxiety, go back to that fear, and we don't have any more, we feel our powerlessness. We don't feel secure. We don't feel important. I think oftentimes the put downs and getting angry and thinking you're better than someone or less than someone
yeah,
or whatever. I think that comes from a space of not really feeling secure in your own skin,
yeah,
you know.
yep,
Mhm.
yep.
And
100%
owning
agree.
owning your own story, whatever that means, wherever you are in the process.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And learning to love that story.
Yeah.
A good story is based on having conflict, and yet we often, try and eliminate all conflict from our
We're conflict
lives.
avoidant.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are. And
Mhm.
yet that's what makes a good story, you
Mhm.
know? We don't really want to hear the story of someone who never had a problem in their whole life and every day was happy. And, that's not really an interesting story. An
Mhm.
interesting story is about someone who's had to overcome challenge, who's had difficulties, who's had problems, and somehow figured out a way through.
Mhm.
That makes a good story. And
Absolutely.
every one of us have that kind of life.
Mhm.
We have a good story. We just have to find it within ourselves to recognize it and then ask what might actually help me tell a better story,
Mhm.
because it's out there for
Yeah,
all of
and
us.
I think we have to give ourselves permission to write the story.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
poised as editors.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
judging it before it comes out. You
yeah,
know, we're
absolutely.
we're like, oh, if I could say it this way, I couldn't,
Yeah.
whether it's writing or whether it's art. I mean, I think a lot of times people, I know I've done this where, I draw and paint and stuff, and it's just kind of like, okay, but this is the canvas. Now I actually have to touch the canvas.
Right.
Oh, you know, you
Right.
know, we have to let it come out. We have to,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
So true. So true.
So for anyone who's watching or listening who is really struggling with where they are right now, struggling with, uh, honoring their story, whatever that means, and who also would like some hope as to how we can, even they feeling as they are right now, can create the kind of life they want. What would you
Yeah.
say to that person?
You know, I would say, first of all, there's always something to acknowledge and hold a piece of gratitude for.
Mhm.
If you can inhale breath into your lungs, that's something. That's something to have the first step of gratitude for. one of the great honors that I have in my life is, aside from all the other work I do, I get to serve as the executive director for the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And
Wonderful.
yeah,
Hmm.
Joseph Campbell once said that he believed people weren't so much looking for the meaning of life as much as they were the rapturous experience of being alive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are breathing air into your lungs, there's
Hmm.
hope. There's hope
Yes.
because something very well may cross your path unexpected
Hmm.
that provides all new opportunities.
Hmm.
I often tell people, think back to a moment in your life where when you woke up on a certain day, you had no idea what was going to happen that day, and something good happened.
Hmm.
That when you went to bed that night, your life was completely different. Yet when you woke up, you had no idea that thing would happen that day.
Hmm.
That possibility is out there. If
Hmm.
we can hold on to possibility, there's always hope.
Yes.
Possibility exists for even the person who feels like they are completely stuck in their situation. There's no way out. They've tried everything, yet possibility still happens.
Hmm.
And if we can hold on to possibility, there's also a freedom that says, you know what, as long as I keep trying to find my way out of this, I may be met on the road by possibility that I didn't even see coming.
Yeah. Well, and it's out on the road that it comes, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's the thing another, series of movies that I love and books is Harry Potter. And I know we've talked
Yes.
about Harry Potter before. But what is it that Dumbledore says to Harry in the first book where he's missing his parents so much and he just wants to be with his parents and he finds the mirror of Erised,
Mm,
and he sees himself with his parents in this mirror. And he just goes there night after night, sneaks out of his room, goes there, and just watches that
yeah.
mirror.
Yeah.
And one of the times that he's there watching that mirror, Dumbledore catches him and appears out of the back of the room and says, "Ah, this is where you've been coming. I see." He goes, and he explains to him what the mirror of Erised does, is that it shows you the deepest desire of your heart. But he says, men have wasted away in front of this mirror.
Mm,
It does no good. I'm going to butcher this. It's such a beautiful quote, but
yeah.
it does not do to dwell on dreams,
Mm,
but rather, to live your life, right? Paraphrase,
yeah. Yeah.
but it's a powerful scene and it's a powerful piece of wisdom because dreams can be seductive. Dreams are so amazing, and imagination. I mean, Einstein knew the power of imagination.
Yep.
Jung and so many thinkers, so many ancient mystics
Yeah.
all know the power of imagination.
That's right.
But we need to meet that imagination with steps forward on our path so that we can be met by possibility, as you say,
That's right.
going into and moving forward towards what we want,
That's right.
right?
That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Trusting that maybe there's good stuff coming out of the ether.
That's
Yeah.
the thing is
Yeah.
we have to keep ourselves open to possibility. You know,
Mhm.
that's the agency we have. We can choose to do that. Now, many people give up and they choose not to do that. But we always have that choice. As long as you can draw breath into your lungs,
Yeah,
you have that choice.
that's right.
And you can choose to keep open to possibility. Even if that's the only thing you can do, that's
Mhm.
something.
It's where you start,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
It's where we start.
That's right.
Well, I tell you what, this has been so much fun.
Yes,
And
for me too.
And I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on the show today and tell us a little bit about if anybody hears this podcast or watches this episode and they want to talk to you further about some of these things, or they'd like to
Yeah.
work with you, let us know how they might do that.
Absolutely. I love to hear from people. If you go to my website, tellingabetterstory.com, it's got all the ways you can connect with me right there, social media and directly through the website. And I'd love to hear from anybody that heard the episode. And even if you just want to say hi, I love to hear people that want to just stop by and say hello. So I always love meeting people.
Well, wonderful. Well, I feel so much better about the world knowing that you're out there helping people create better stories. Because,
Uh,
boy, I'd like to see some better stories.
Me too.
I
Me
really
too.
would.
Let's go tell some
Let's
better
do it.
stories
Let's
together.
let's do it. Yes. And I just want to thank you all for viewing today or listening. I'm Dr. Industry Rajan. This is Dr. John Booker. Um, and both of us are coaches. I'm also a therapist. And if you would like to find out more about my work and if you'd like to connect with me, please go to my website. It's www.theconscious-life.com. And I would love to hear from you. You can sign up for a newsletter and find out what's going to happen in the future. You know what things you might be able to participate in. So I hope you reach out to both of us. We would love to hear from you. And we're wishing you a wonderful day. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like it. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Industry Rajan, and I hope that you're enjoying this video. If you'd like to see more of this content, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Conscious Psychologist.